Imagine sitting in a luxury high rise apartment when suddenly you hear screaming from floors away. Minutes later, security called 911 and police arrived to find a young man bleeding from a single stab wound, telling everyone around him, "I'm dying, I can't feel my arm." The woman cradling him said that it was self defense, but investigators started looking closer and things didn't add up. The autopsy and blood evidence told one story, but someone else told another, and surveillance cameras captured months of violence leading up to that day. So, was this truly an act of self defense, or was this the tragic ending to a pattern of violence that had been building behind closed doors for months? This is the story of Christian Toby Obumseli. Welcome to the True Crime Nurse, everybody. My name is Kat, and I'm a registered nurse who loves all things nursing and true crime. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell before you go. Today's case is still unfolding, and it's going to be going to trial pretty soon, but after digging into this, I see why it's been requested. With that being said, let's get started. Christian Obumseli was born on April 12, 1994 in Dallas, Texas, but to his family and friends, he was just known as Toby. He was the youngest child in a close-knit Nigerian-American family, and he was known for his radiant smile, personality, and the electric energy that he brought into any room. He grew up in North Texas and attended Plano East Senior High School, where football became one of the most important parts of his life. He played middle linebacker, and he was talented enough that that sport actually opened other doors for him too. Christian earned a full ride football scholarship to Abilene Christian University, and then he transferred to Texas Tech University, where he studied engineering. Not only was Christian, or Toby, driven and athletic, but he was also ambitious. He'd been a student athlete, then an engineering student, and then he moved into the world of cryptocurrency to make a living for himself when times got tough. His life eventually took him to Miami, which is a busy city that attracts people that are chasing money, reinvention, attention, and opportunities. But Christian wasn't defined by status, money, or attention. He was joyful and warm, and people genuinely loved being around him and felt re energized after spending time with him. In November of 2020, Christian crossed paths with a girl named Courtney Clenny in Austin, and before they knew it, the two of them had become inseparable. This was in late 2020, after the first major wave of the pandemic had already started to impact people's jobs, relationships, routines, and entire industries. A lot of people in their 20s were moving, changing careers, working online, or trying to make an income in less traditional ways. For Christian, that was crypto after losing his job, but for Courtney, that was building an online empire as a model and an influencer. She worked as a model and online creator under the name Courtney Taylor, but her image was her income. Her work took her to all kinds of different places, and Christian typically traveled with her too. By the time Christian and Courtney moved to Miami, though, their relationship had become serious enough that they decided to move in together. One Paraíso Residences in Miami is where they called home, and this is a luxury high rise building with all the amenities and security you could dream of. As we tend to see in the true crime space, though, despite their relationship seeming beautiful and perfect from the outside, things were very different behind closed doors. Their relationship was already showing signs of volatility, and by early 2022, the building that they lived in started to document that in a way that later became central to today's story. By January of 2022, neighbors started to complain about loud arguments, and some of these complaints came from residents as far as 2 floors above their unit. Their fights were loud enough and frequent enough that management was working on taking legal action to evict them. There were even photos found in Christian's phone of selfies, including cuts on his face, almost as if he was documenting these fights too. Sadly, nothing came from this at the time because he didn't pursue a restraining order or anything like that against Courtney. But then came an elevator incident on February 21st, 2022. The footage shows Courtney physically attacking Christian inside that elevator, and it's honestly difficult to watch knowing what's about to happen. She walks into the elevator first, starts hitting the elevator wall and the buttons, then she proceeds to slap, hit, and pull Christian's hair. He used his arms to try to keep her away from him, but I'm going to insert the clip so that you can see for yourself what was going on in their relationship at this time. Now, people stay in toxic relationships for complicated reasons like love, hope, fear, money, pets, housing, shame, and the belief that things will hopefully get better. But by late March, Christian and Courtney had broken up, at least temporarily, and Courtney told her friends and mom that she didn't want to be with Christian anymore. She said that he wasn't who he seemed to be, but she didn't really elaborate further on that. Courtney made Christian leave the apartment while her mom was there visiting from Texas, but after her mom got back home, Courtney and Christian reconciled and he moved back in on Friday, April 1st, 2022. The very next day, police were called back to the building once again. Officers found that Courtney had kicked Christian out of the unit and said that he'd allegedly tried to follow her back into the elevator. Courtney asked officers about a restraining order against Christian, telling them that she believed he was stalking her, but there was no proof, so no arrests were made on that day. The officers also noticed that she appeared to have been drinking, and later that same day, Christian came back to the apartment and the couple seemed to have patched things back up. But the following day, though, things would take a very dark, irreversible turn for the worse. April 3rd, 2022 in Miami was a beautiful day. It began peacefully with Christian and Courtney playing with their dogs, and then later that afternoon, Christian left the apartment and came back with Subway sandwiches for both him and Courtney. Key fob records showed that Christian left the apartment at 1:15 p.m. and returned back to the building by 4:32. Surveillance footage showed him leaving the service elevator with the dogs at 4:33, and around that same time, Courtney finished an Instagram live video. Phone records confirmed that she called Christian at 4:01 right before going live, and then again at 4:33, which is right around the time that he got back. At 4:43 p.m., Courtney called her mom, Deborah Clenny, and just 3 minutes later at 4:46, building security called 911 to report a disturbance. This means that either a resident or staff member connected to the building had heard enough to call for help before Courtney ended up calling 911.
City man, please.
3101. It's 130, so 130.
Ma'am, listen to me. You need to stop screaming on the line and give me the address.
3101.
I'm gonna die. I can't feel my arm.
3101.
I can't feel my arm.
Ma'am.
So my boyfriend is dying of a staff.
Ma'am, what is the address?
What's that? What's the address, baby?
3131.
3131 Northeast 7th Ave. Please, God, please. Come see my
Okay,
boyfriend.
what is the phone number that you're... Ma'am, is this a house apartment or a business?
512-745-3582.
Is this a house apartment or a business?
Baby, I'm so sorry. Baby.
Ma'am, can you hear me?
If you have a stab wound to his shoulder, you can sit down.
What do you mean he has a stab wound on his shoulder, ma'am?
Yes, he's bleeding from his shoulder.
Rescue, this is PD Physician Juliet. The caller, ma'am, hold on one moment. The caller advised the address is 3131 Northeast 7th Avenue, 31 Northeast 7th Avenue. The phone number is verified. The caller advised that her boyfriend has a stab wound. Okay, is this a house, apartment, or a business?
Get up. Listen, please, God, please, God. Please, God,
Listen, ma'am. Listen, I'm sending help. I need you to tell me exactly what happened. I'm sending help. How old is he? Ma'am, how old is he? Is he awake? Hello? Hello? PD, are you still on the line? Yes, we're still on the line. She didn't provide a room number or anything. No, did she tell you where he was stabbed at? She said he was stabbed on his shoulder. Okay. Do you know if there's more than one wound? No, she didn't say. She just kept screaming on the line saying that he was dying, and that he needed help, and she kept apologizing. But we do have a call at that same address in reference to a fight that happened. The room number could possibly be 2201, because we already have a call that two people are fighting inside of that room. So they're possibly related.
At 4:57, Courtney called dispatch, and during that call, you can hear Christian in the background saying that he was dying and that he couldn't feel his arm. He was terrified. Courtney was apologizing to him as she was screaming that he was dying, and she told the dispatcher that her boyfriend had been stabbed and they needed help. When someone with a traumatic injury says that they feel like they're dying, people sometimes assume that it's just panic. But in severe blood loss cases like this, a sense of impending doom can be a very real thing, and we're going to talk more about that here shortly. The body understands danger long before anyone else in the room fully does, and the brain is still awake enough to recognize that something is gravely wrong. Police and City of Miami Fire Rescue responded to one Paraíso residences at 3131 North 7th Avenue in Miami, and when officers entered that apartment, they found Courtney cradling Christian in her arms. He had one stab wound to the chest, and the two of them were sitting in a puddle of coagulated blood. This blood had already begun to clot, which meant that Christian had been bleeding there for a period of time before they arrived. The police immediately questioned Courtney at the scene while they worked hard to try to save Christian's life. There was so much blood, and because of the location of the stab wound, the first responders knew that the chances of him surviving didn't look good, but they stabilized him enough for transport. They headed to Jackson Memorial Hospital, but sadly, Christian succumbed to his injuries just days before his 28th birthday. His family was beyond devastated to lose him, especially with him being so far away. The Miami-Dade County Medical Examiner determined that Christian died from a stab wound to the chest, and it punctured the right subclavian artery. The blade entered at a downward angle, and it traveled to a depth of 8 centimeters, which is just over 3 inches. The manner of death was, of course, classified as homicide. Now, a single stab wound can sound non-life-threatening to people that don't work in either medicine or forensics. It may sound less severe than multiple stab wounds, but in the world of trauma, the number of wounds is not what determines whether or not somebody survives. A penetrative injury can be fatal if it enters the wrong area and strikes the wrong part of the body, and in Christian's case, the knife hit one of the most vital structures in the entire human body. And if you've seen the Selena video that I covered a few months ago, this should sound familiar to you. The subclavian artery is a major artery located beneath the clavicle or collarbone, and it carries oxygenated blood to the arm. This is not a superficial or small vessel near the skin. It is a major high-pressure artery in a deep and difficult-to-reach area. A wound to that area can cause rapid blood loss, and because of where the artery sits, it can be extremely hard to control outside of a hospital setting. That's why what Christian said on the 911 call makes sense when he said he couldn't feel his arm. The nerves running through the shoulder and arm are in the same general area too, so when a patient with this type of injury says that they've lost sensation, you would immediately think about blood flow, nerve involvement, possible shock, and or damage to the upper chest and shoulder area. When someone has an arterial injury, the most important intervention that anybody could do is apply pressure to stop the bleed. The subclavian artery is especially dangerous because it's not easy to compress because it's hidden under the collarbone, close to the chest and shoulder. You simply cannot place a tourniquet above it. If the vessel is punctured deeply, controlling that bleed would require surgery or emergency trauma intervention. Also, remember that Christian said, "I'm dying." And someone in severe shock can feel this sense of impending doom because their body is literally in a crisis. Any first responders watching, feel free to weigh in the comments, but we all know that when a patient brings up impending doom, our ears immediately perk up because things are definitely going to take a critical turn. The depth and direction of the wound are also very important in Christian's case because that can help to determine whether or not Courtney's telling the truth about what actually happened that day. We'll get into her story here in a second though, so just hang tight. Again, the medical examiner said that the blade entered at a downward angle to a depth of 8 centimeters or a little over 3 inches. Courtney told the police that she threw the knife from over 10 feet away at Christian in self-defense during an argument. The ME and investigators did not believe that a knife thrown from that distance would have caused that wound that took Christian's life, though, based on the location, angle, and depth. And I think anyone listening would agree that that excuse makes no sense given what we know about his injury. This is one of the biggest disputes in this entire case. The defense has argued that Courtney acted in self-defense, but the prosecutors argue that the physical and medical evidence does not support that theory. Now, when it comes to blood loss, a healthy adult male carries about 5 liters of blood. Losing 30 to 40% of that volume rapidly could easily send a person into hemorrhagic shock. In the early stages of shock, the body tries to compensate by increasing the heart rate, then blood vessels will constrict, blood gets shunted back towards the heart and brain and lungs, and this is why a person losing blood quickly will say that they're feeling cold, numb, or losing sensation entirely. This is also why sometimes victims or patients will seem alert and okay when they're really not. We know that Christian did not die instantly based on both the evidence at the crime scene and the fact that first responders brought him to the hospital. That is what makes this injury so tragic. There may have been moments where he was alive and aware of what was going on and the betrayal that had just happened to him. As we touched on earlier, the autopsy classified the manner of death as homicide, but it doesn't automatically decide whether the death was murder, manslaughter, self defense, or legally justified. That is up to the courts. But medically, the examiner concluded that Christian died because another person inflicted that fatal stab wound to his chest, and Courtney admitted that she did this. Now, when it came to the crime scene itself, Unit 2201 at the residences in Miami was a 3-bedroom, 3-bathroom condo with a private foyer. Investigators focused on several areas inside their apartment, including the kitchen island, the living room, the primary bedroom and bathroom area, the guest bedroom, and the area near the guest bedrooms where the officers found Courtney holding Christian. At this point, the investigators needed to determine how this all happened, exactly where it happened, and whether or not the evidence matched Courtney's story, because Christian wasn't here to defend himself or tell his side of the story any longer. The apartment showed blood evidence all over, so it wasn't isolated to just one crime scene, which told them a lot right away. They found blood droplets near the kitchen island, more leading toward the master bedroom and bathroom, and then back again toward the living room. It almost seemed like 2 separate trails. Near the couch in the living room, they found a bloody knife and a bloody bedsheet, and then they found another blood trail leading back towards the guest bedroom. At the entrance of that guest bedroom, there was a puddle of coagulated blood and blood transfer on the wall, and there was also another pool of coagulated blood where the officers found Christian in Courtney's arms. Right away, it seemed to me like maybe Christian was spontaneously attacked in bed, hence the bed sheet, but let me know if that crossed your mind too. All of the trails of blood tell us a story of movement, though. Blood near the kitchen island suggests that Christian was bleeding in or near that area, or moved through that area after he had been stabbed, and the rest of the path tells us that he was trying to fight for his life and get out of there. The bloody knife and bedsheet being near the couch and the blood trail headed back towards the guest bedroom tells us that he wasn't slowing down. He was trying to get away from Courtney. Sadly, the coagulated blood near the guest bedroom means that Christian remained there long enough for blood to collect, so this may have been when he was beginning to feel weak from that internal and external blood loss that was going on. The blood transfer on the wall is especially heartbreaking to think about, though. Christian may have touched the wall, leaned against it to brace himself, or maybe made that contact while losing strength to support himself by holding himself up. The investigators believe that he collapsed in that guest bedroom area before attempting to head to the front door to try to escape, which is just so disturbing to think about. The knife was another key piece of evidence, and investigators said that it looked similar to their other knives that were found on the kitchen counter. Despite how the scene looked, though, in the ME's findings, the defense still maintains that Courtney acted in self-defense and that a thrown knife could have caused Christian's injury. The difference between their stance and the prosecutor's stance, though, is that one of their sides is supported by science and fact, and the other is based off of nothing to support it. I will be curious to see what they come up with to defend that theory during trial. Something else that I want to touch on is Courtney's overall appearance and state when she was arrested. According to the arrest affidavit, Courtney told the police that Christian shoved her up against the wall by her neck, but that he did not choke her. She also said that he threw her to the ground, but then allowed her to get back up. And investigators did an overall assessment of her body, and they didn't find any injuries that corroborated what she was telling them. She also never said that Christian had a weapon, so when you pair this with the video that we watched of them in the elevator, it's hard not to draw our own conclusions before trial as far as who the real aggressor was in their relationship. All that I know is that CCTV footage is unbiased evidence, so we'll have to see what else is shared here soon. I will say that this doesn't automatically disprove self-defense because not every attack would leave obvious injuries. A person can be grabbed, pushed, or threatened and not have visible trauma, but when someone claims that a violent physical confrontation happened shortly before a fatal stabbing, investigators need to look closely for marks, bruises, scratches, swelling, redness, neck injuries, or any kind of defensive wounds or anything else that would have supported their story. In this case, investigators said that they didn't see anything to support what Courtney said happened. Phone evidence complicated things even more. Courtney's mom, Deborah Clenny, was on the phone with her daughter during part of that attack window, and according to the affidavit, Deborah told police that she heard Courtney telling Christian to leave, and she was accusing him of lying. Investigators also said that Deborah did not tell them that Courtney said she was being attacked during that phone call. That goes directly against Courtney's story. A text was also sent from Courtney's mom at 5:25 that evening, so shortly after the stabbing, that mentioned self-defense, and she told Courtney not to speak with investigators without an attorney there with her. Sure, it's good advice to hire representation no matter what, but her mom texting her to say that this was self-defense before she was arrested is concerning at best. The building evidence was also crucial because one Paraíso had key fob records showing exactly when Christian left and returned, and surveillance showed him coming through the service elevator with the dogs. Because of how high-tech their building is, there were timestamps for literally everything. Management and staff had already documented repeated disturbances there too, and we saw the February elevator footage where Courtney attacked Christian. So, investigators had independent records from the building, their phones, 911 calls, physical evidence, and from the medical examiner to figure out if Courtney was being honest here. This type of evidence is extremely important in domestic homicide cases because the surviving partner oftentimes will control the narrative. The victim can't explain their fear, injuries, thoughts, or what really happened to them in the moments before they were killed. So the investigators have to reconstruct that person's side through the evidence. And thankfully, they had access to it, when many cases that we talk about sadly don't. In Christian's case, his side of the story came from the apartment itself. It came through the blood trail, the 911 call, the autopsy, key fob records, the prior incidents, and the surveillance footage. The prosecution's theory is that Courtney's violence had escalated over time and that Christian died as the final result of her anger. They feel that the relationship was volatile and toxic, and that Courtney may have felt that she was in danger on that particular day. The apartment can't tell us every word that was spoken or what Christian felt when he walked back inside that day. It cannot tell us exactly what Courtney was thinking either, but it can show us where blood fell, where the knife was found, where Christian moved, where he collapsed, and whether the physical evidence supports or contradicts what was said after that. In this case, investigators believed the physical evidence created serious problems for Courtney's version of events, and we're going to see how that plays out at trial. After Christian's death, Courtney wasn't immediately charged for murder. The investigation continued for several months as police, prosecutors, and forensic experts reviewed all of the evidence and Courtney's statements. On August 11, 2022, Courtney Clenny was arrested in Hawaii after the Miami-Dade prosecutors announced a second-degree murder charge against her. She was arrested in Hawaii, but she waived extradition and she returned to Florida right away. That means that she was free and traveling for 4 months after she killed Christian. Her attorney says that it was self-defense, but the prosecutors showed that Christian had been the victim of DV here and that Courtney's story didn't match the forensic evidence. Courtney pleaded not guilty, and since then, the case has moved very slowly through the court system, which again is an unfortunate theme that we see here in the true crime world. There have been multiple pretrial issues, including disputes over evidence, prior incidents, and a separate computer-related investigation involving Christian's laptop. That separate issue was that, allegedly, Courtney and her parents broke into Christian's laptop after his death, and they were actually arrested for this, but those computer charges were later dropped because a judge ruled that that evidence was inadmissible, so the ruling created even more issues for getting trial started. So the murder case has also been delayed. A trial date was set for April 2026, but both sides needed more time, and now it looks like they're aiming for a late summer or late August 2026 trial, but I will be keeping an eye on this. Thankfully, Courtney has been charged, but she's not been convicted yet. She's pleaded not guilty, and the court still needs to decide whether the prosecution can prove beyond a reasonable doubt that she is guilty. But Christian's family has been living with their grief in this legal holdup ever since April 3rd, 2022. For them, this is about the loss of their Toby. It's about the birthday that he never got to celebrate and the call that no family ever wants to receive. He should still be here, and my thoughts and prayers are with his family as they navigate this trial. Justice is coming. Thank you so much for listening to Toby or Christian's story today. Like I mentioned, I will be watching for trial updates, but let me know what you thought about today's case, and please leave me some case recommendations in the comments down below. I am trying to avoid cases involving kiddos because the last time that I did, it really took a toll on me, but feel free to leave me some suggestions. Don't forget to do something good for your mental health this week, nurse's orders, and drop me our secret handshake, the butterfly, in the chat if you made it this far into today's video. I will see you next time. Bye.